I really love the Lord.
I really love the Lord.
Say, I really love the Lord.
I really love
The Lord.
the Lord.
You don't know.
You don't know what He's done for me.
And He gave me the victory.
The victory.
Say, I love Him.
I love Him.
And I love Him.
Love Him.
Lift your voice and say, I really love. I really love the. Lift your voice and say, I really love the Lord.
I really love the Lord.
Everybody say, I really love the Lord.
I really love the Lord.
Say, you don't know.
Don't know what He's
Come on, let your testimony ring out.
for me.
And He gave.
The victory.
And say, I love Him.
I love Him.
And I love Him.
Love Him.
Say, I really love.
I really love
Love. One more time. Say, you don't know. You don't know.
You don't know what He's done for me.
And He gave me.
Victory.
And say, I love Him.
I love Him.
And I love Him.
Love Him.
I really love the Lord. It is absolutely wonderful and the right thing to do to put your hands together, and let's just go ahead and celebrate the voices that were just lifted before us. We want to welcome everyone to the Meeting Place Church of Greater Columbia, along with Glory Communications, for our town hall meeting for this season. We are just absolutely excited, hallelujah, happy, and thank you, Jesus, glad. Now, this is not a church service, but it is at church. And so it's at a church, so it is in order. I saw a few of us when they were singing, our feet wanted to pat. We didn't know whether to clap our hands, stand up, or what to do. But it is in order that we could put our hands together one more time, and let's just celebrate. I want to welcome you. We have just a few minutes before we go live, but I do want to welcome you. For those, I see most of us are family, but for those that are visiting, we welcome you to the Meeting Place Church of Greater Columbia. This wonderful congregation started 18 and a half years ago in the back of high school with a bar stool and a Bible. And we're just absolutely happy to be able to host you here on this campus. It is 215,000 square feet, 23 acres. We have an 8-cinema movie theater, first run movies that will be opening in November. New restaurant will be opening. Some 23 businesses, amen, that are a part of this village of encouragement. And we're just at this point doing everything we can to be a transformative force in the community, and so we just welcome you. We are streaming live via the internet, and so to our internet community, let's say welcome to all of those that are streaming via the internet. I'm going to open us with a prayer in just about a minute, and before I open us with prayer, I do want to encourage you just to shake somebody's hand that's around you. Shake their hand very quickly and tell them, welcome to the meeting place. Welcome to the meeting place. Welcome Welcome, welcome, welcome to the meeting place. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Amen, amen. Brother Glimp, if you give me a nod to let me know when we are going, transitioning over, are we on? Amen. I do want to welcome everybody. Those that are listening to us via the World Wide Web, those that are listening to us via the various radio outlets for Glory Communications, we welcome you and we celebrate what is about to happen here. To all of our candidates, we welcome you. To all of our partners that collaborate with us, that help to support what we're doing here. Attorney Kenneth Davis, Boykin and Davis Law Firm, Rick Phillips from Spotlight Cinemas of the Meeting Place, Danny Stubbs, Philip Ashley, and yours truly from the Meeting 3 Cafe. And to all of our candidates, we will present you in just a moment. But let's just lift up a word of prayer. Father, we honor and bless you for this Meeting Place Town Hall. We thank you for all those that have collaborated, and we pray very simply that the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts would be acceptable in your sight. Bring civil discourse into this land. Let this be a starting point for us to lift up voices so that the people can be heard and those that serve the people can indeed hear. We thank you and we praise you in the name that is above every name, and that is the mighty, matchless, inimitable name of Jesus the Christ of Nazareth. And everybody said, amen. Would you all help me celebrate our moderators in the person of Mr. Don Frierson and Miss P.A. Bennett? Amen. And we're so blessed to have this tremendous leader, Brother Antoine C. Wright. Let's give God praise for them. And let's give a warm Meeting Place welcome. I'm going to turn it over to them. It's for you all to lead us from here.
Well, thank you very much, and we're very, very happy to be here and be a part of this town hall meeting. It's important that we get out as a broadcasting network, and also that we get an opportunity to be with you so that you can get questions answered and talk to those people who are vying to become our representatives on several levels. So we're really happy to be here this evening, and we hope that you get something out of this, and that indeed that you will participate and ask questions, because that's why we're here tonight, so you can get your questions answered. Again, my name is P.A. Bennett, and it's a pleasure for me to be with you, and Mr. Don Frierson, it's always a pleasure for me to be with him. So we're going to call out the names of the candidates that are with us this evening, and as we call out your name, we're just going to ask you candidates and those of you participating in this discussion this evening to come up front, and once we get everyone seated, we're going to ask each of you just to give a brief introduction. Okay, give yourselves a brief introduction. All right, let's get started. Mr. Shakese Newton, I'm sorry, Ms. Shakese Newton, excuse me,
She's a candidate for Richland County Council, District 2. Ms. Shakese Newton, let's give her a big hand.
David Brown is a candidate for the South Carolina Agriculture Commissioner spot. Is Mr. Brown here? Mr. Byron Gibson is a candidate for the 5th Circuit Solicitor's Office.
Mr. James Smith, who's candidate for governor, will be arriving a little later on, and as soon as he comes, we'll get him on stage. But we want to call to the stage Mr. Cambrell Garvin. He's candidate for House District 77. Mr. Garvin.
Mr. John Metters is a candidate for the 5th Circuit Solicitor seat.
Give him a big hand. Mr. Ivory Thigpen, he's a candidate for House District 79. If Mr. Thigpen is in the house.
Mr. Trav Robertson is the chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party. Is Mr. Robertson here?
And finally, Dr. Teresa Jones Holmes. She's a candidate for Richland County School District 2. Let's give her a hand.
Again, we thank all of our candidates for being here, and we look forward to hearing from all of you this evening. First of all, let us get a brief introduction. Shakise, Ms. Shakise Newton, would you please give us a brief introduction?
Good evening. I'll project. Closer. Hello. Good evening. My name is Shakise Newton. I am a Columbia native. I was born and raised here. I'm running for Richland County Council District 11. If you're not familiar with Richland County Council districts, that is a diverse district that actually starts at the VA hospital, and then it goes all the way down Leesburg Road, all the way down Garner's Ferry Road, ending at 601 in Eastover. I'm a mom. I'm a business owner. I am related to people who have worked hard in this community to make a difference, and I wanted to follow in those footsteps to restore trust and accountability in Richland County Council. Thank you so much for having me tonight.
Good evening. I'm Byron Gibson. I'm the Democratic nominee and candidate for the Fifth Circuit Solicitor's Office. For those of you who don't know, the solicitor is the district attorney, the prosecutor, the person who heads all of the prosecutions for Richland and Kershaw counties. I've practiced law for about 22 years, 21 of them with the law firm of Johnson, Toll & Batiste right here in Columbia. I'm a 1989 Dreher High School graduate. I attended the College of Charleston and later the University of South Carolina School of Law. I'm running because I want to restore accountability. I want to restore credibility, integrity, and trust in that office, and also do things more efficiently, do it better, and do it in a way that will be fair to all of our citizens in Richland and Kershaw County. So I look forward to speaking with you and answering any questions that you have.
Good evening. My name is Cambrell Garvin. I'm the Democratic nominee for South Carolina House District 77. Again, first of all, allow me to say thank you to the Meeting Place Church for hosting such an event, as well as thank you to each and every one of you all for taking time out of your schedules to come out and hear from the candidates tonight. A little bit about me. I was born and raised right here in Columbia. I'm the proud product of the Richland One Public Schools. I went on to attend Winthrop University, where I graduated in 2013. After having served as a student government president for 2 years. I went down to Colleton County along the I-95 corridor and spent 3 years as a public school teacher in one of the most rural communities in our state. After coming back home, I enrolled at the University of South Carolina School of Law, where I'm currently in my final year at Carolina. I decided to run for office because, like as President Obama said, if you aren't happy with what you see happening in your community, grab a clipboard and do something about it. Look forward to engaging with each and every one of you all tonight. Thank you.
Good evening. Bishop Freeman, Mr. Grant, thank you all for making this possible tonight. It is an honor for me to be here. I am the independent petition candidate for Fifth Circuit Solicitor. I'm married to Patricia, my wife. I have 4 children. Graduated from Wofford College and the University of South Carolina School of Law. I started working in the Fifth Circuit Solicitor's Office in 1987. I was there till 91 as an assistant solicitor. From 91 to 95, I worked in the South Carolina Attorney General's Office in the State Grand Jury Division. From 2005 to 2003, I was the first assistant solicitor in charge of Kershaw County. And from 2003 to 2010, I was the deputy solicitor of Richland and Kershaw County. I lost in a runoff 8 years ago to Solicitor Johnson. After that, I started working with Pat McWhorter and McWhorter, Bellinger & Associates, and I also started working for the Honorable Solicitor Ernest A. Chip Finney III as his violent crime prosecutor, which I've been doing the last 8 years. I love this job. I've been committed to it since I started. And I hope tonight you ask me anything you want to. I want to be your Fifth Circuit Solicitor, and I'm ready to go. Thank you.
I am Dr. Ivory Thigpen, but I'm going to take this time to yield to my colleague and future Governor James Smith.
How we doing?
Good evening. Let me change that.
All right, who's ready to win an election? All right? That's what we've come here to be about because it is so important. This election is going to affect generations. And I'm running and I'm here for the same reason you're here. We love this state, we care about its future, and we care about the people here. And we know they deserve better. And so when it comes time to making sure, and my running mate and I, we've been traveling the state. Matter of fact, I just got here from Aiken, having made a number of visits to communities down there, and I was in the PD yesterday taking a look at some of the damage, and then Spartanburg before that, and then Greenville. But everywhere I go, there are several things that I see that have got to change. Too many of our fellow South Carolinians have a fear that when they get sick, there's no way to get help. They don't have health care coverage. There's no opportunity to seek the help that they need. Well, I know this. That shouldn't be the case in South Carolina in 2018. And when I'm governor, one of the first things I'll do with a stroke of my pen is expand Medicaid in South Carolina and give health care to thousands, hundreds of thousands. We have got to do this. It's the right thing to do. It's the fiscally responsible thing to do. It's $2 billion of your money that's going to deliver 40,000 jobs. That's $2 billion a year. And it's not just about the money. We're going to make sure we're going to do it in a way that supports preventative care and make sure we ensure a healthier state for everybody. And I know this. You cannot move South Carolina forward if you're willing to leave some behind. And too long we've had leaders willing to do that. We know we've got to have leaders that care more about doing this job than keeping this job. So when we look outside and we see we need new roads, right? I'm going to be a governor that's going to sign a bill for new roads, not veto it because I'm worried about my future in a primary. It's about serving the people of our state first and always, right? We know the difference. We can tell the difference. I know it, and from my experience in the military and serving overseas and the privilege of leading American soldiers in combat, there's no lying in combat. You can't fake it, right? You're either going to be there or not. And you're going to know the people to your left and right are going to be there no matter what. That kind of commitment to serve the people first, we need that kind of commitment in the governor's office, and that's the kind of governor I'm going to be for South Carolina, right? You know that? We also know our kids deserve better. We love this state and we love this people, but we know our kids deserve a high-quality education, and they're not getting it. And there can't be a clearer choice, my friends. There just cannot be a clearer choice. We have got a governor his idea for improving education is to arm our teachers with weapons. My friends, I'm going to arm our teachers with better pay because they deserve it, right? We got a teacher crisis, and we're going to do something about it. You know, people say, it shouldn't be all about the money. Well, when you're the 50th in starting salaries for teacher pay, it's about the money. But I don't know a teacher who's gotten into teaching to become rich, because you don't do that, right? You do it out of a love of serving our kids. So we got to have competitive pay, but we're going to do a lot more. We're going to lower class sizes. We're going to make sure that I always think about what the headlines might look after 4 years of serving this great state of ours. One thing I want to see is that the corridor of shame no longer exists. It's the corridor of innovation, because we're delivering on the promise for our kids in South Carolina, right? My name is James Smith, and I am so grateful for the opportunity to be with you all this evening, to talk about the future of our state, because this election is going to affect generations to come. And please know this campaign is not about me being governor or my running mate being Lieutenant Governor Mandy. This campaign is about the people of our state and their future and the leadership they deserve, that they can count on a governor who's going to be there fighting for them all day, every day, and making sure we deliver the South Carolina that we know can be, but is not yet there. My friends, we have to win this election. Let's do this together. Thank you all. God bless.
We'll continue with introductions. Mr. Thigpen.
Yes, I am Dr. Ivory Thigpen. I am the current representative for District 79. Beyond being a politician, I am a pastor. I am also a physician. I'm the owner of Restore Chiropractic on Farrell Road. But my most challenging job is a parent. I have 4 children, 2 girls, 2 boys, and the reason why I am excited about what I see before me today is because I, one, want to be thankful and encourage more persons, regardless of what area or even if you are a religious institution, that all of us have a vested interest in what happens in our government. And we need people not only creating these type of venues where issues can be discussed, but I'm excited with the fresh breath of air that comes from people saying, I offer myself to serve. Now, the choice and the option is always ours to vote, but I believe with more options come more opportunities. That's why I ran. Many would say, with the many hats that you wear, why would you even consider being a public servant? But I think that is the very reason why I must be or offer myself as a public servant, because I do care and I am involved and I do have an interest, and I believe all people do. So the more they get involved, I believe the better we will be as a society and people. I am Dr. Ivory Thigpen, representative and incumbent for House District 79.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Teresa Jones Holmes, and I'm running for Richland County School District 2 School Board. And I kind of feel like I'm on an island all down here by myself. You know, it's kind of lonely down here on this end. But that's okay, because sometimes you have to walk alone. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I am a newcomer to politics. I know absolutely nothing about politics, and I'm finding out about it very quickly. But that's not my reason for being here. I'm a career educator. I have been in education now for you're going to tell my age now, 32 years. 32-year educator. I have been a teacher, a special education teacher, a guidance counselor, a guidance director, a cheerleading coach, a ninth grade academy coordinator / developer, a grant writer, an assistant administrator, and I currently am still working as assistant administrator / guidance at Fairfield Career and Technology Center. My experience, I have been in Richland District 1 and various counties, but serve Fairfield at this present time. I am also a product of Richland District 2. I'm a Spring Valley High School graduate. My children are products of Richland School District 2. I love District 2. It's where my home is at. And some people say, well, Teresa, well, why would you, I'm kind of like this, they say, why would you bother to do this? My late husband, who was Reverend Dr. Jacob Arthur Holmes, Jr., who was the pastor of New Mount Zion AME Church and also a career educator at Alcorn Middle School, we would often sit around and talk about what we could do with education. But anybody who's ever been a first lady, they know how busy your life can be. So we would talk about this, and we would say, after we get, I would tell Jacob, I would say, after we kind of slow down with the church, and maybe I can slide it in there, I kind of want to do it. Kind of want to run for school board someday, because I know I can make a difference. Because I might be new to politics, but I'm not new to education. I'm not new at this, I'm true at this. Understand what I'm saying? But at the end, thank you. But at the end of the day, with him passing, I said to myself, you know what? Life is precious. You can't wait for tomorrow. You need to step up and do what you need to do now. I am going to be, if elected, and I'm going to speak it into existence right now. When I am elected, I will stand for your children, because I think everyone's child needs to be treated fairly. I will stand for the teachers, because, ladies and gentlemen, I used to be a teacher, and I know what it's like in the front line of that classroom. I know we do not get paid enough. We absolutely do not. But we don't do it for the money, we do it for the love. That's the first thing. But money is good. Let's keep it real. Second of all, third of all, I want to do this also for the administration and the parents, because you deserve a voice on the board that is not one, and this is no slight at anyone else, but I have no additional political ambition. And I am not trying to do this for any other reason except for I love education. It is what I do. It is what I am. It's what I've been about. So when you go to that poll, please remember to vote Dr. Teresa Jones Holmes. Now think about this. Just remember Sherlock Holmes. Y'all all know who Sherlock Holmes is. So when you go to that lever, pull the lever for myself, and you will be pulling for someone who is for you. Thank you.
Let's give all of the candidates a big hand. Ms. Bennett will have the first question. We ask that each candidate keep their remarks to 3 minutes or under. and you will be on the clock.
Looking at your candidacy in the office for which you're running, how will your platform directly affect our community? Yes. Yeah.
Nobody told me when I sat here I was going to have to answer every question first.
Oh, you won't. You won't.
So the question is, how will my candidacy affect the community?
Your platform.
My platform. I'm Shakese Newton, as I said, and when your name is Shakese, you have to say it a few times. So I'm Shakese Newton. I'm running for Richland County Council District 11, and the heart of my platform is about transparency, it's about accountability, and it's about restoring trust to Richland County Council. And the reason that that's the heart of my platform is because it's like if you build a house, you have to have that foundation and it has to be solid. You can plan whatever you want, but if you don't have trust that the people who are representing you are really representing you, then you can't achieve the things that you want to achieve for the community. And I was fortunate enough to knock on hundreds and hundreds of doors in the South Carolina heat over the summer to talk to the voters. And when I would knock on their doors, I said, you know, I never aspired to be a politician, but I don't think it's political to want better roads that don't rip up your tires. I'm not a politician, but I don't think it's political to want better schools for our children. I don't think it's political to want good health care, to know that when you call for an ambulance, that one's going to be able to reach you even though you're far away down in Eastover. To me, none of those things are political. They're quality of life issues. But when we look at Richland County Council in the past, what we've seen is we've seen people who were more working against things than working for things. We've looked at them spending our money saying, how could you possibly do that? And I can't speak for your background, but I was raised by a single mother, and she was pinching those pennies so tight you could hear them scream at night. And that's what I want to see with Richland County Council. When you look at us as a community, we pay the highest taxes of any county in South Carolina. What are you getting for it? Did you know that every single county in our state is growing except for one? You know which one that is? That's ours. And so what we need is a new direction, one that is based on trust, one that is based on accountability, and you have someone like me who has business experience. I've worked around this country and around the world. I know what it is to build bridges. I know what it is to manage a budget. I know what it is to have an organization that has to deliver results. And so when I go back around in 4 years, I don't think accountability is something that's for the other guy. I think it's something that's for everybody. I want them to look at me and I want them to say, nobody worked harder for us than Shakese Newton. Our roads are better. We're supporting our schools better. We're supporting public safety better. These are pocketbook issues, and what we need are more people paying attention to what happens on the local level. I'm running to be a public servant, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson.
That's trail policy.
I announced my candidacy back in March for several reasons. The first of which is because, again, as I mentioned to you before, the solicitor is the chief prosecutor for all of Richland and Kershaw counties. And when you have a chief prosecutor, that means that that person is in charge of supervising all of the criminal investigations and all of the criminal prosecutions. My background is different than most because I did not aspire to become a politician, similar to what Shakese said. I've been a criminal defense lawyer for 21 years. And in that, what that means is I've been defending families and defending people one by one, fathers, sons, husbands, wives, people who've been accused of crimes throughout Richland County, Kershaw County, throughout 36 counties in this state. Federal prosecutions, federal defense. I've done state defense. I've done anything from traffic tickets all the way to murder cases in defending people who have been accused of crimes. And what you find is that people have started to lose trust in the criminal justice system. I run because we have to restore trust in the criminal justice system. As a defense lawyer, what I learned is you can change things one by one, family by family. When you're doing things, when you're holding people accountable for the decisions that are made, when you're sometimes holding law enforcement accountable if bad decisions have been made in prosecution. But what you can't do is you can't change policy. As the solicitor, you can change policy. You can make sure that everything that you do starts with accountability, starts with the belief that all people are entitled to a fair trial. Justice is blind. And so my aim is to make sure that I don't care what zip code you come from, if it's 29209, if it's 29223, if it's 29204, 29205, that you have the same access to fairness in the criminal justice system as everybody, no matter what you look like, what your complexion is, what your race may be, what your religion may be, what your creed may be. You should have fair access to our systems. And you need to understand that your system, that the solicitor's office is going to conduct itself in a way that's going to make you proud. We're going to be thorough in what we do. We're going to be accountable with your monies. We're going to be fair in our diversion programs, because that is key. You have to make sure, we have to make sure, and I'm pledging to you that we have to make sure that our youth are having the true opportunities for minor situations, minor crimes, to have diversionary programs that are there for them that can make sure that they're not stained for the rest of their lives. And if you've made a mistake, there should be a path to re-entry into our communities so that you're not crippled for the rest of your life by a bad decision that you may have made when you were 19 or 20 or 21. Those things matter to me. Because when I sit in people's households, when I've defended my clients over the years, I've had them come to me and they say, you know, Byron, I paid my penance. I was in jail for X amount of time, but I can't find a job. We have to begin to draw those, we have to make sure that we're building our relationships and rebuilding our relationships.
Thank you.
And we'll talk more about that, but I need your vote.
Mr. Smith, and once again, when people begin their conversation, they have 3 minutes. You're on the clock. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Frierson, and Ms. Bennett. Thank you both so much, and to the Meeting Place Church. It is wonderful to be with you this evening. This is it. This is the time. This is a moment we cannot miss in making sure we win this election, because we all want for our kids a little better slice of life than what we had for ourselves. And we know in order to get it, we got to have those promises fulfilled of a high quality education, because I don't care where you come from, right? Or who your parents were. We all need to have access to that high quality education, because with that, it's the foundation of our democracy. It can make the opportunities to be fulfilled. The road out of the poorhouse is gonna lead past the schoolhouse, and we have to fulfill that commitment. And that's number one. Job one for a governor is to be an education governor. We've had them before. We remember when Jim Hodges was governor, I was privileged to sponsor First Steps to School Readiness, our first ever early childhood education initiative, and we were headed in the right direction. That was 20 years ago. 20 years before that, it was Dick Riley who set the standard and made South Carolina a leader when it came to public education. Lord knows we have to get back to that. 20 years before that, it was Fritz Hollings. And I don't know, there's something about every 20 years we seem to come and get it right. Well, let me tell you, it's 20 years in 2018, and it's time to get it right, and we need another education governor in South Carolina, my friends. I know this too. It's just going to take a stroke of my pen, but that's not the hard part. The hard part is making sure we win this election, and I'm going to deliver health care to hundreds of thousands who need it. That is fundamental to making sure that this state we love and the people we love, have access to a fundamental resource. When they get sick, they need to be able to have access to a physician. And I know all across this state there are too many people that don't have that, and we're going to deliver and expand health care coverage and make sure more have access in South Carolina after this election is over. I want to share, my friend Byron raised a really good point about our criminal justice system. And this is another sign where you can tell when a governor's looking out for your interest or their interest. We got together, passed a expansion on expungement rights. So those that have paid their debt to society could have their record expunged and be able to access a job, an opportunity to get back to work, support their family. Well, everybody supported it. Republicans and Democrats supported it. All the chambers around the state supported it. But our governor vetoed the bill because he was more worried about his future than our future. It is important. This is a workforce question. We have jobs available, and we need to put the hardworking people of our state to have access to these jobs and these economic opportunities for our future. And as your governor, I will always side with the people of our state. And you can count on that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Cambrell Garvin, House District 77 candidate.
Thank you, sir. A little bit about District 77, first of all. District 77 is a vast district. It covers communities such as Meadow Lake, Lincolnshire, Fairlawn, Hollywood Hills, and it also covers newer communities along the within the Blythewood area. District 77 is a vast district. So we see folks that are doing extremely well. So we have middle class earners that are doing well, but we also have folks in District 77 that are struggling. And some of our communities, for instance, an example of this would be economic development is something that's essential and that I think is absolutely essential. An example of this would be, as I was walking a neighborhood a few months back now, I was talking to a resident out in Blue Ridge Terrace. Anybody know where Blue Ridge Terrace is located? And she said, Mr. Garvin, I've been living in this community now for about 60 years. And she said, when my family came here 60 years ago, she said, you wouldn't believe it, but we have less today than we did 60 years ago. I said, well, what do you mean by that? She said, well, 60 years ago, we actually had a grocery store in our community. She said, well, 60 years ago, we actually had places and things for our children to do within our community. And that bothered me. It bothered me greatly that certain areas and certain communities are flourishing while others are remaining stagnant and aren't growing. So as the House member, if given the opportunity to serve after November, economic development is going to be essential. In addition to economic development, I mentioned earlier, I spent 3 years as a public school teacher down in Colleton County along that I-95 corridor. On my first day in the classroom, we had a smart board. Everybody knows what a smart board is. Everybody know what a smart board is. You can plug your computer in and you can write on it and interact with it that way. So we had this expensive smart board, but we didn't have a working computer to go with that smart board. So when I tell you that there are disparities in education, it's true. It truly opened my eyes to see that there are disparities and that we've got to do something about it. And I know that when we elect James Smith as our next governor, I look forward to working with him to make something happen. And last but not least, I think I decided to run to show young folks that they aren't just the future, but that they're the present as well. And so to all the young folks that are listening tonight, never let anybody tell you what you can't do or who you can't be, because you know what? The future is waiting, and young folks, it's time for us to grab those horns and take them. And so I'm gonna leave it at that and give the rest of my time to Mr. Meadors.
Mr. Meadows?
Mr. Meadows.
First of all, I'm just going to take the liberty. I think the South Carolina Democratic Party chairman came in, and Trav Robertson now in the middle. I just want to recognize you and welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Thank you. Sorry I'm late.
Platform. My platform is going to be the same platform I've had for the last 30 years. The solicitor's job, and it says this, the solicitor's job is a minister of justice. A minister of justice. Your job is to make sure the rules are followed, make sure the searches are done right, make sure the law enforcement does it right, while the solicitor has the power to get rid of the case. The solicitor has the power to decide when somebody should be prosecuted to the fullest. Individuals that have murdered and raped our loved ones. Individuals that aren't going to follow the rules. A solicitor, and it's a unique position. I love this position. It's so unique. You not only get to do that, but you also are the decision-making person and part of the process of when an individual gets a second chance. And that's just as important. I've been doing that for 30 years. Prosecuting to the fullest, giving someone a second chance when they deserve it. And both of them are just as fulfilling and rewarding, and both of them are just as important. And respectfully, I think having the experience doing that for 30 years is what's needed right now. Experience in prosecute. The toughest case is for a young prosecutor, and I was this one down. Young prosecutor who's got a 17, 18-year-old kid who's committed a burglary, hadn't been in a trouble before. You got victims saying, give them everything. You got law enforcement maybe saying go after them. You got a young kid who deserves a chance, knowing how to handle that situation, how to tell law enforcement, tell the victims, look, we're going to take a chance. And those aren't easy decisions, but knowing when to do it and how to do it is important, and I think it takes experience. Expungements, I agree. My former boss, Solicitor Gazay, and I, 10, 12 years ago, we started having expungements on Saturdays where people would come to churches and we'd look at their record, and if it could be expunged, we'd help them expunge it. It was people who'd had jobs for 20, 30 years, they'd lost their jobs, they tried to then go back and get new employment. They run a criminal history sheet, there's something on there that could have been expunged, and it wasn't. Should that happen? Sure. I think the veto was overridden, so now, starting soon, there are going to be more things that are expungible.
Hadn't got to it yet, we will. Hadn't got to. You're going to. We will, but hadn't got to.
But that's important. That's important. There's certain things that should be expunged, and I'm in favor of that.
Thank you, Mr. Meadows.
Does that count the time he gave me? Okay. All right.
Yep. You're listening to a live town hall meeting at the Meeting Place Church. It's beautiful facilities. For those who are listening on air, we'll now go to our next candidate, Mr. Ivy Thigpen, candidate for House District 79. And before you answer the question, would you repeat the question, Ms. Bennett?
The question is, how will your platform affect our community?
Well, hopefully, what has been seen in the past 2 years, as well as what will be seen in the future terms that I serve, is that the platform is reflective of the hopes and desires of the people in the district. We're in some very dark and uncertain political times where really people could easily lose hope, not only in the officials that serve, but the government system as a whole. That's why I think it's refreshing that we see new people with new ideals and passion and commitment for people. And our passion and commitment be more for people than for politics, more for people than for partisan gains. Sometimes we can have partisan blinders on to such a degree that we lose sight of common sense. As I serve, the one thing that I pray that I always will be is not only a moral compass, but the one who will bring us back to just that steady footing of common sense. The thing that I've learned in serving in the State House is that there are a lot of good people, but good people don't always equate to good ideas. And sometimes people who have good intentions will lead you in a wrong way. That's why I think you have to have people who are not concerned about staying there, not concerned about having a career, not concerned necessarily about lining their pockets, but are concerned about what's best for the people and the state of South Carolina. Simply said, my message is hope. My platform is hope. Healing racial tensions, opposing drug abuse and domestic abuse, promoting public safety, and increasing education and health funding.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dr. Holmes.
I'm going to answer that question by asking you all a question. How many people in here would like to go to a surgeon who has read all the books but has never performed a surgery? Or would you prefer to go to the surgeon who has had practice at the surgery and can do it with his eyes closed? Y'all didn't answer the question. I think we all know the answer to that. You prefer to go to someone who has the experience. Reading about it and hands-on experience are two very different things. And when you talk about asking people to make decisions that are important, that impact everybody's platform up here, then you need to have somebody in the system who has done these things and knows what's needed. For example, the following jobs, the job market in the next couple of years is going to be highly based on career and tech programs. Now, everybody says, you know, now I'm from the minority community too. We all want our children to go to four-year college. But how many of us have four-year college graduates at home with no job? Amen. Okay? And so what I'm telling you is I work at a career center now, and I see that the career centers that we have now are not the nail and hand kind of things. I'd like to see us move more forward into things like the Lexington 5 district is doing. They're steady building career centers because they know that the careers are steadily going in that direction. Also, to my teachers, I'm trying to hurry for my 3 minutes up. Also, to my teachers, we need pay. and you deserve to have pay for what you do. A salary scale should not stop at 23 years or 24 years, and you have to work, and you know you're going to work beyond that. And the only increase that you will receive, you can clap for that, and the only increase that you will receive is a step increase. That's ridiculous, but you're expected to work until you're well into your 60s. That's the next thing. Also, in schools, a lot of our children, I'm a former special education teacher, we have an enormous amount of minority males who are placed into special education. Yes, you can clap for that also. Being a former special education teacher, I made it my practice. If you did not need to be in special education, you were getting out of special education. Because the problem, thank you, because the problem is that if you stay in special education too long, you may not have been special, but you will become specialized. That's a fact. So what I'm saying to you is, again, I'm going to keep saying this all night long till y'all get this. I am not new to this. I am true to this. I'm an educator. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Robertson, thank you very much for joining us. And we do want to hear from you, and we want to get an overview. South Carolina is a red state, so we know that the numbers aren't necessarily on the Democratic Party's side. How is the Democratic Party and the candidates for the Democratic Party, as far as numbers are concerned, how are the numbers looking?
Well, I'm going to respectfully disagree, but first I want to thank you for having us here tonight. You've got some wonderful candidates, and I apologize for being late. We've been on the road all day. But I think that South Carolina is an independent state that trends Republican because Democrats sometimes don't run good campaigns. And I think, one of the reasons that James Smith is sitting here tonight is because he realizes that the African American community is no longer a monolithic voting bloc and that we can no longer overlook communicating with the African American community. And I think that's a first mistake that Democratic campaigns have made in the past. But I also think you've got to look at three simple issues. Our candidate for governor talked about access to health care. Expanding Medicaid gives the least of these access, at least 400,000 access to health care in this state. But most importantly, it helps the hospitals who are crippled because of the Republican control in this state. And I think also everybody in this room pays a power bill. We pay the highest electricity rates in the country. The Republicans gave you that high power bill, not the Democrats. They control the House, they control the Senate, 6 of 7 congressional seats and 9 constitutional offices. They gave the CEOs of those companies $1 million bonuses while they fleeced everybody in this room. And so the issues are on our side. We've got candidates like James Smith and the ones on this table, on this dais today, who are talking directly to voters in the African American community and communities all across the state. And we're communicating about messages that affect the lives of people. And I think those two things will benefit the Democratic ticket in the state of South Carolina.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate that.
We are going to go to our audience. If there's anyone in the audience who has a question, please raise your hand. Mr. Antoine C. Wright, you see him standing up. He will...
Hollywood.
Yep, that's him. Please raise your hand and he will come by with the microphone and you can ask a question. We ask that you keep your questions to 1 minute or less. So if we have any questions, you can raise your hand right now and Mr. Seawright will approach you with the microphone.
No, we want questions. We don't want comments. Questions, not comments. Questions. Let me ask you a question. Who's happy to be here? Now, Pastor, I learned this little trick when I was growing up doing what we call the happy test. So if it's okay with you, I want to do the happy test. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, and your face will truly show it. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. All right, I just want to make sure everybody's happy. Y'all look sad.
All right, if you have a question, just raise your hand. Thank you for that song. Sing along, Antoine.
I might be auditioning for the praise team, dog.
That's right. I hear you. I'm going to join you on that one. All right, we have a representative for Miss hold on one second, Antoine.
Yes.
We have a representative for Rosalind Glenn, who's running for state treasurer, Ms. Jennifer Cliven. Would you just stand up so we can see you? Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am, your question.
This question is for our future governor. I solicited some questions from Starbucks on Forest Drive this morning to ask you. Hey, Trav.
Hey, Amelia. How are you?
We were really very interested to learn your impressions of how South Carolina has handled last week and will handle going forward Hurricane Florence.
Yes.
And also, if you could share what you might have done different in going forward, the steps that you might take to help Nichols, South Carolina, for example, which is flooded out today. And Mary Turbeville said tell you hello.
Oh, good.
I have 4 kids at Brockman.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Amelia, very much. I was grateful to be just one of thousands participating in the Hurricane Florence response, and having over 2 decades of service in the South Carolina Guard over the past 2 decades at every disaster facing our state, every threat. I've been just one small cog in a giant wheel helping to respond, and that experience is important for me as the next Commander-in-Chief. I'm ready for that job. I know our response process. I know these plans because I've helped write them. We've rehearsed them. I know when I was crossing all of the areas along the PD, I was running into soldiers and first responders that I've served with for years. And while I think I need to be very careful, we're still in a response mode. I'm not here to criticize our current Commander-in-Chief because we need to be together in our response to this hurricane. I do know I have the experience to make good decisions when faced with future threats to our state. And I also know the ways to balance that threat with also the hardworking people, many of whom are hourly wage employees who will never get that time back, right? And so these are not easy decisions to be made. When you look at what we're facing in the PD, and it's not over, it's going to continue to, flood waters are going to continue to rise as it moves down to the Waccamaw and that area, and we won't see those areas crest potentially till Sunday. What I'm encouraged about is this: the tremendous resilience and the strength of the people of our state. Having been in the PD and in Bennettsville yesterday, and I found it very difficult to leave. I wanted to stay there with them and help them, continue to work to begin the recovery. But you know what hadn't happened yet? And despite the visit of 45 yesterday, we're still waiting on the presidential disaster declaration from Marlboro County. And that needs to come, my friends, and I've asked him, and when we were there today, I made it very clear. The need is there, and the recovery cannot begin until 45 acts and delivers on the commitment of a federal disaster declaration for that area, and that needs to happen. In the future, count on me to work with all of our partners to make sure we're prepared for the threats that will come in the future. I know what we need to do to pre-position resources and people and troops so that we have the quickest recovery. Some of this stuff is Mother Nature. And the good Lord, saw to spare us a great deal this past week. We were mightily blessed despite what are serious threats and obviously serious loss of life, 37 souls being lost this week.
You have 30 seconds.
But it certainly could have been far worse. So what that means is we need to be prepared for the future. And as your governor, I'm prepared to make our state in the safest possible position to deal with the natural disaster threats that we know are going to come. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question as far as you mentioned the educator here about the special needs or special education. I have a special needs daughter. She's 18, and my concern is her future as far as employment. We've talked to different people. I've applied for everywhere for some assistance, and they always seem to want to put her in a janitorial place, but she's actually really capable. And I want to know what else can be done to so employment can be equal for her as well.
That's a very valid question. One thing that you can possibly do with that is, depending on, and if you need to ask me privately later on, I'll be glad to talk with you about that. But one of the things that you can do, if your child's label, for example, is LD, certain colleges and universities have to provide accommodations for your child to be able to continue their education. That's something that you definitely need to look into. Also, I would want to talk to you privately, because every situation is different for every child. But if your child was on the diploma track, there is some other programs that she should also be able to qualify for. So I can't give a blanket answer to that, but what I can tell you is this, that there are programs. Now, I'm going to go back a little bit. One thing that I think that's part of my platform with special education for Richland School District 2 is that we have to do a better job of, for example, your child leaves school and they can stay till they're 21. But after 21, what happens to them? There needs to be some connector programs with other jobs outside of just folding shirts or putting on buttons, because that's not going to be a job that they can have if you leave this earth and you have to leave them by themselves. So I get exactly what you're saying about that. So there needs to be things like, I think Richland 1 still has a program called the ROAD program, but there needs to be an extension of that. Richland 2 has to come on board with making sure there's a quality education, not just for those students who are AP or honors or bring glory to the district in that format, because every child, every voter, every student, every parent pays taxes and they want their child educated. So if you elect me, Dr. Teresa Jones Holmes, remember Sherlock Holmes, if you elect me, we will address those issues. And I promise you, one thing I can tell you, I'm a real lively, spirited person, but I'm very serious about what I do. I like to joke, and you'll see me joking and I'm laughing and I'm always having fun. But as I used to tell my students, when it comes to the business, it's a time to play and it's a time to do business. If you elect me, I'm going to do your business. Thank you.
I understand Representative Smith is on a tight schedule and we may be about to lose him. If anyone has a question for him at this point, please do ask that question quickly here.
We'll take one more question for Mr. Smith.
Whose hand was up?
Somebody.
I do have a question. I was going to direct it to the solicitors, but I would welcome Representative Smith to respond. And it's with respect to the cash bail system. As a pastor, I'm typically on the other end of the line when we receive those calls and have to go through the process of contacting our church attorney, Attorney Kenneth Davis, to vet it, to make sure the person isn't a flight threat or a danger to society before we step in for them, because they simply don't have the same resources others might have in order to get back to work, so that they can have the resources to resolve their issue. And I wanted to just hear what kind of ideas you may have had to collaborate with faith-based organizations who often pick up the slack and the weight in order to bridge that gap so these individuals can get back to work. They're not flight threats, they're not a threat to the community, they just don't have the money.
And Bishop, I'm glad you asked that question. Again, 21 years as a criminal defense lawyer, I see that multiple times a week. And what you find, there are two major factors that you just astutely mentioned that are required for a judge to look at when a person has an opportunity to have a bond. Essentially, a person is charged with a crime, and at that point, they have an opportunity to have a bond. There's a constitutional right to a bond unless there can be proven that you're a flight risk or a danger to the community. Flight risk meaning you're not going to appear for court when called. Danger to the community can mean that you have a series of charges that or where you've injured others and you may not be able to be trusted, but the court considers you not to be able to be trusted to be out because you may hurt others. Or it may be the charge in itself. For instance, maybe it's a murder charge, attempted murder, things of that nature. But you asked about cash bonds, and essentially I think you're talking about more or less nonviolent offenses. There is a system called PR bonds, personal recognizance bonds. And I'm a believer that when you can be clear that a person, especially they have a job, they have some kind of ties to the community, PR bonds are proper. Because there is not a history that a person has of having a criminal record, and they can be assured of coming back to court. We've got to make sure that system is properly used and used whenever possible. I think our magistrates do a decent job of that, but we got to make sure that we do that. We also have to just look out here and understand that when it comes to bonds, when a person is charged with a crime, number one, there's a stigma that immediately attaches to them. So number one, that stigma's out there. They may lose a job. They may sit in jail if they can't get that cash bond. They may afford a bondsman. Sometimes they're asked to wear an electronic monitor, which costs money that they have to individually pay out of their own pocket, which oftentimes takes place. So we have to just be in a position where we can start to try to reform those pieces. And for the most violent crimes, you have to appear before the court to make sure that you're not going to be a danger to others or a flight risk. That has to happen. But in the less serious matters, we just have to find ways to make sure that people are working. Because if you are sitting at Albert S. Glenn Detention Center or Kershaw County Correctional Facility for a period of time, you've lost a job. Your family falls farther behind. If you're on child support, that support goes without being paid for a period of time. And you have a person, a head of a household often, who cannot support the family. And we're not in the business. We cannot be in the business of having that happen. It's not about destroying families. The solicitor's job should be, if you have to take a person's liberty, meaning if they have to go to jail for a period of time, you can do that without taking their dignity. And we have to learn to make sure that we're respecting all of our citizens. And I think you disrespect them when you don't give them an opportunity to have a bond on those matters where they should have one.
Mr. Metters?
Thank you. Usually the magistrate set bond, and the magistrate's two criteria are, is the individual a flight risk or danger to the community? A criminal history sheet is presented to the magistrate. If victims under the Victims' Rights Bill are entitled, and I think, you want to say something before you leave? Go ahead. Go ahead.
The candidate for governor is about to leave us, so we're going to let him speak for about
my
2
apologies.
minutes.
It's not often that I have to leave in the middle, and I don't wait till November 6th. November 6th is the last day to vote. The first day is October 8th. We cannot afford not to be successful in this election and elect leaders that are going to be responsive and focus on South Carolina and her people first and always. The first day for in-person absentee voting is October 8th. I urge all of us to talk to our neighbors. This is not my campaign to be governor. Again, this is about our people and the future of this state. And I thank you very much for the privilege of being with you tonight and for the time that we have together. But each of us need to take ownership of this. We all have a responsibility. We're all here for the same reasons, and we want a better place for our kids and our kids' kids. And to do that, we have to win this election. So let's get ready and let's get to the polls on October 8th and begin getting this done. Thank you all. God bless. Thank you so much.
James Smith, candidate for governor, Democratic ticket.
Bishop, if I can just briefly finish that answer, and I'll be brief.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
We're starting the clock all over again. Go ahead.
No, I won't hold you. But the flight risk and danger to a community, those are the two issues that a magistrate and sometimes a circuit judge, depending on whether it's a violent offense, considers. A person's prior history is considered, and also if there's any victim, they have a right to give their opinion. If somebody's not a flight risk or a danger to the community and it can't be shown to a judge, they're entitled to a personal recognizance bond. Under the Constitution, they're required. They're entitled. Each magistrate has their own, well, there's the criteria they're supposed to use. If they're different bonds, that may depend on the different jurisdiction. I don't know. But if a bond's too high, a defense attorney can file a motion with the circuit court, and it happens a lot to have the bond reduced. It all depends on the cases, all depends on the circumstances. There's certain individuals who've committed violent crimes that need to be in jail, that are a danger to the community, that are going to hurt you and going to hurt me and my family, and we don't. That's who the jail needs to be reserved for the people that are committing serious violent crimes. In addition, very briefly, there are alternatives. You can use a bracelet. That's better than being in jail. You can also ask a magistrate to post 10%, so you don't lose the money. You can post 10% with the court instead of going to a bondsman. Bondsmen don't like it, but when the case is concluded, you get that money back. So in that case, you could get the money back. So that's another alternative. Let us post the money with the court. Thank you.
You're listening to a live town hall meeting sponsored by the Meeting Place Church and WGCV Radio. Antoine?
Don Frierson, can we just add a little caveat? We're going to focus on questions, not comments, for our panelists. Y'all can keep y'all answers to 2 minutes because we want to get as many questions from the audience as we can. I love y'all to death, but we got to stay in our 2-minute time frame. 2 minutes.
All right, 2 minutes.
This question is for Dr. Holmes, and it is regards to our current education curriculum. I was just curious to know your feelings about maybe adding a few more African American history studies to our curriculum, especially at the middle and high school level, because I feel that will have a profound effect on all students, but especially for the urban community.
That is something that we in education have talked about for a long time. Having 1 month out of a whole year to celebrate Black history, to me, is not Black history. We've said that several times in the educational community. To answer your question, I absolutely think that that has to be more inclusive in the curriculum, because there's something that's been said. If you don't know where you came from, you absolutely don't know where you're going. We have a group of children that have no idea about Jim Crow. We have a group of children that have no idea about slavery. And no other race diminishes their history because they know that there is power in history. We have to make sure that they are including our history. We have to make sure our children know our history. So when you ask me that, yes, I'm absolutely for more inclusion in that outside of just a 1 month little celebration. Again, I'm Dr. Teresa Jones Holmes. I'm not new to this. I'm what? I'm true to this. Thank you.
Before we go back to the audience, I would like to ask Ms. Shakise Newman a question. She's been sitting here. Newton, excuse me. There's an issue in Lower Richland about plutonium leaking from the Westinghouse plant. I would like to know, what is your position on that, and if elected to office, what positions would you take to see that such things not happen again with the plant?
Thank you for your question. Thank you for your question. So there are a lot of issues that you see with Westinghouse that you see sometimes in communities where this is not the first problem that we've had with Westinghouse, and it's not the second problem that we've had with Westinghouse. And so from a Richland County Council perspective, I think that there are a few things that we need to keep in mind. One is that sometimes there are areas that Richland County Council controls and there are areas that Richland County Council influences. And so this is an area where Richland County Council and I as a representative would have influence, where we have to demand accountability, not just from Westinghouse, but from the people that are supposed to regulate them, where we have to be the voice for citizens to demand answers. What I found at the meeting the community meeting that I went to is we had a community that felt like we have had this meeting before where we've had these same problems, you've made these same promises of responding to us, of answering our questions, of providing outreach to us, but you've done nothing. So one of the things that Richland County Council is doing right now is demanding that accountability and making sure they're answering questions. It's providing some services that are needed for the community to make sure we're doing things like testing the well water so that people feel confident that they are going to be safe. But I think that what we have to do in this instance, again, is we have to be that voice that demands accountability, and we have to work with our partners in the State House who do have control over some of those regulatory questions about Westinghouse to make sure that people are served. So it is representing, it is being a voice, it is demanding accountability, and then where people aren't stepping up, it's seeing where can we provide money in our budget so that we can provide those services, that comfort that we need to provide. But we absolutely have to rely on our partners who have responsibility in that area and making sure that the voices of the people are constantly heard, that their protection is a paramount priority, and that we don't find ourselves in a situation again where we're having the same old community meeting because we have problems that haven't been dealt with.
Thank you, Mr. Seawright.
Don Frierson, I think the next treasurer of South Carolina just walked in the room, Ms. Rosalind Glenn. Y'all give it up for Rosalind. I also know we have two other candidates for Richland 2 School Board, Mr. James Manning and Mr. Craig Plank in the back. Y'all give them a hand. Before I give Ms. Jennifer Clyburn Reed the mic, I want to reiterate our rules. We do questions, not comments. For our panelists, we do 2-minute answers. We want to stay efficient with people's time tonight.
Absolutely, I'll make it quick. Down ballot constitutional races don't get the attention they deserve, and we're glad that Ms. Glenn is here. However, this question is for Trav Robertson. Could you explain to the people why it is important to have a qualified South Carolina treasurer in office?
That sounds like collusion, Don Francis.
The state treasurer is the state's banker. And the fact is that right now, the lady who just walked up on this stage actually created a functioning real credit union that deals with regulations and banking issues and credit and debt and liabilities and money all day long. It's still in existence. The current state treasurer is a bug man. He's an exterminator. Now, there's nothing against exterminators, but do you want an exterminator handling the $25 billion and the millions of dollars in state assets, or do you want someone who actually started a credit union and comes from a financial institution? The current state treasurer was essentially censured by the General Assembly last year. They took away any role he plays in the state's retirement system, and then they took away the custodianship of the retirement funds. And what that means is we now have no elected official who can lift up the rug and see whether or not the Investment Commission is spending the retirement dollars well, or if they are doing the investments well, or if there is corruption, because we have a state treasurer who is an exterminator and who believes in antagonizing people instead of working together, as opposed to a state treasurer's candidate who actually created a credit union and comes from the financial industry. That's the reason our state treasurer, and most importantly, the state treasurer of South Carolina is one of the few constitutional offices that is actually set out in the state constitution, which means that if, God forbid, something were to happen to the governor or the lieutenant governor, the treasurer is the third or the fourth in line to take over in the order of succession in South Carolina. That's why it's important.
Thank you very much. Mr. Thigpen, Representative Thigpen, my question to you is the V.C. Sumner nuclear plant and what is going to be done on that issue. Do you have any thoughts, and do you have any ideas of which plan you would support?
Well, thank you for the question. Definitely, we all know that it was a failed project, and we have yet to recover what we need to for the ratepayers of South Carolina. The problem, I think, that happens is that we're a lot of times more concerned about we're not concerned enough about the persons who are really suffering the most under this. As I believe Trav referenced earlier, that we pay the highest rates, and the legislature had an opportunity to really provide more relief than what it did. But I think a lot of people were more concerned about who was going to be funding campaigns than they were about the people who elected them and sent them there. Amen. That's why we need more politicians who are concerned about the people of South Carolina.
Don Francis, you're going to get me beat up back here asking questions. It's supposed to be from the audience. I've gotten plucked in the back of my head twice.
Well, they didn't have much to pluck, but go ahead.
It wasn't me. I don't know this man. And, okay. My question is for the candidates for solicitor. And I heard there were, you mentioned the different ways in which persons who, with PR bonds and different ways, I guess, they can handle situations when it comes to money. But I don't know. Let me get to my question. The question is, what are the checks and balances systems when it comes to matters that's upholding the integrity of the court
and maintaining, how do I say it, objectivity, you know, because there have been a lot of decisions, and I guess I'm speaking for personal experience, when some of the decisions are a little bit subjective, and you can't get that PR buy even if you deserve the PR buy. So who goes in and what are the checks and balances system to make sure everyone is treated equal? Because each magistrate is different. Oh, so I hear you.
Okay. Well, the magistrates are appointed by the legislators, and so I'm a proponent of all of our magistrates, and I mean no disrespect to magistrates. It's a hard job, and there are many very good ones out there throughout the state and in Richland and Kershaw counties. But sometimes they are not lawyers, which means they have not been trained legally, and so they may not have the depth of being able to go back into certain case law, statutory law, things of that nature, in making the decisions that are made. Again, that is no disrespect towards the magistrates, but many states require magistrates to be lawyers, and so I think that may be one of the checks that's out there that can make decisions more consistent. In terms of what's the check and balance system for it, it has to be speaking to your legislators, letting the bar know if there's something that is out of bounds, letting the South Carolina bar know what's happening, what's being said, and then the lawyers.
By then it's too late, and I don't want to cut you off, but what would be a plan for it?
The plan is, I think the plan is what I mentioned. Making there are what you call continuing legal education hours that are required. But let me say this: it's not under the purview of the solicitor, but those are things that there are continuing legal education hours that are required. But if you require magistrates to be lawyers, there could be more uniformity in those decisions. Other than that, the issue that you have is you got to appeal. When things are not done properly, you have to appeal. And you're right, that sometimes may feel like it's too little too late, but the squeaky wheel gets the most oil. You have to let your legislators know, you have to let the bar know if there are problems and things are being done unfairly. Sometimes the decisions that are made may not be the decisions that we want, but if they are based on what the law requires, it's a decision that is in the purview of the magistrate. But there is an appeal system that can work if done properly.
The practical checks and balances, if the bond is too high, the defense attorney will file a motion immediately for a bond hearing in front of a circuit judge, and if the criteria is not met, if the person is not a flight risk or a danger to the community, usually the circuit judge will lower the bond. I don't know your individual situation. Would be happy to talk to you about that to you in person, but that's practically the checks and balances on the scene. If it's a high bond, as a prosecutor, I try to move the cases in jail as quickly as we can, but the checks and balances immediately filing a motion, get a reconsideration.
Focusing on questions, no comments, 2-minute answers.
Thank you. And Antoine's on his knee, y'all. I'm so excited. I do. Okay, this is a question for Dr. Holmes. How would you prioritize the following and why? Raising teacher salaries, building new schools, and building athletic facilities.
Very good question. I'm an educator, so you know what I'm going to say first. Number one is absolutely raising teachers' salaries. You know what's interesting to me is people say all the time, they have all those summers off. They don't have to work that hard. We hear that all the time. But what they don't realize is that in education, the only real way that you can raise your salary is to increase your degree status. If I was a business partner, or if I worked in a business, all I'd have to do is take some classes, and I'm not saying that's easy, but I'd take some classes or I'd make the company some money and my salary would increase. And in the business aspect, you don't have to spend your own money to get a bonus. In education, the only way that you can increase your salary is to what? Spend your own money, pay back all those student loans to get maybe 2%.
1 minute.
Okay? Now, having said that, the other factors, so my first priority would be that. The second one, I believe you said was, I heard school facilities, and what was the third one? Athletic facilities. You know, I think we spend a lot of money. I know athletics is a seed that brings a lot of money to the school, but athletics is not the whole school. I think we have to have a check and balance with the athletics. I think since they do bring money to schools, I think we have to balance that. But the school facilities and where the teachers and the teachers' salaries, that's where it has to automatically start for me. Again, I am Dr. Teresa Jones Holmes. I'm not new to this. I'm true to this. Thank you.
We're going to stay true to this time frame, Don Price.
All right, so I'm going to move really quickly. This is for the solicitors, and this is a situation that's very near and dear to our family's hearts. For individuals who are committing crimes that are considered violent, but no one was injured, okay? When could we expect that the minimum sentence percentage be dropped? Because right now it's at 85%, and there was talk about it going to 65% at one point. And I know of a young man who was 19, committed a crime with 2 other individuals who were 18 or 17, it could be a year off. The 2 individuals were white, they got 6 months, and my individual got 30 years. Okay, so this is very, very personal for us. 30 years, he has to serve 85%, 24 years. At 18, 19, that devastated our family. When could we expect a change?
I don't know what your friend pled to, but let's just say, let's take an example. Attempted murder carries 0 to 30. If a crime carries 20 or more, then you look at 20 years or more, you're looking at 85%. Byron's got nothing to do with that sentence. I don't either. The legislature decides, how much a sentence, and then the parole board. So the solicitor really has no effect on how much of a sentence a person serves. Now, what the solicitor does have a decision-making process, and the 2 most powerful things the solicitor has is determining what a person pleads to. If a person's innocent, they need to go to trial. If an agreement's worked out, the solicitor is the person who decides what they plead to, whether it's a violent, non-violent, and that's usually, or in my case, determines the facts. What are the facts? Lady Justice is blind. I've been doing this 30 years, and you look at each fact. I don't look to see whether a person's a Democrat or Republican, a black or white or independent. Your solicitor should make sure everybody, tough when you need to be, but fair and be consistent, and that's what you can ask. But as far as the percentage, Antoine, I've been good the whole night, but as far as a percentage or how much of violent, non-violent a person serves, that we really don't have anything to do with that. Just have no control of that. We have control of what a person pleads to if they want to plead guilty, and sometimes the amount of time they do. I hope I answered your question.
Your state legislature.
My turn?
Yes, go ahead.
Now, it is true the legislator does control those things, but what a solicitor does control is what a person is charged with. And so my pledge is to make sure that the charges that are made are the true charges. There are really 4 ways that you can dispose of a case. One of them is dismissal if the facts aren't proper. Another way of disposing is sometimes diversionary programs. A third is by trial, and a fourth is by plea. And so the key is to properly evaluate the case up front. That's what I've been doing for the other side, not as a prosecutor, but as a defense attorney, representing people who've been charged similar to what you're talking about, to make sure that those charges fit, and lawyering and fighting to the best of my ability to make sure that the charges fit something that a person pleads to if they choose to plead, or if they go to trial, doing everything possible to make sure that a jury understands what did and didn't happen. Now, the disparity in the sentencing that you mentioned in that particular case, it's hard to tell you specifically because I don't know all of the factors in there. But what you're alluding to is you don't feel that that was fairly done. What I can tell you is that under my watch, we're going to charge fairly, and if the facts don't merit what a person is charged with, then a person should be charged with a lesser crime. You can be tough on crime. You can throw the book at somebody, but it doesn't have to be the biggest book out there. You can also give people a chance at hope when they come out, while still making sure that they're paying their penance. If they went afoul of the law, there are ways that they can be charged. There are ways that sentences can be constructed so that a person can sometimes have time over their head if they plead guilty to a sentence. Maybe there's a 5-year sentence of probation, and during that time there's community service, there's drug treatment, there are other pieces to it that can make sure that a person, again, may lose their liberty, but not their dignity. So that's what I'm committed to, because as I've been in our communities for 21 years doing this, I understand what you're talking to, and you're not the first person who's asked me this question. It happens a lot, and we just have to make sure we're being fair and that justice is truly being done.
Thank you. PA.
You're listening to the Meeting Place Church Town Hall meeting. To our listeners out there in our radio audience, and thank you very much for being with us this evening. Let me ask, one of the things that the Representative Smith talked about is being the education governor. And one of the issues that I see all the time is that a lot of the people in our community don't know about the funds that are available to young people in high school as they come out of college, the whole scholarships and those kinds of scholarships. Whose responsibility is it? Is it our representatives' responsibility to be educating the community about the opportunities, for example, in education?
Anybody can take it.
Mr. Thigpen or Mr. Representative Thigpen?
I do. I think serving as a representative is twofold. One, you get input and you hear the concerns and the issues of constituents. You hope to be not only a voice but a conduit to the people and the places and the resources that they need. The other side of that is to fight for them in the legislature to make sure that as many things that can benefit them and help them in living a life of prosperity that they do have. But you do, in turn, have to bring back out of the legislature information and access to things, because really access is the key. It does us no good to have something out there if we have no idea about it or have no way to get to it. And so what I've come to find out in the short time that I've been there is that there are a lot of resources that are available, but you kind of have to be in the know in order to access that. And sad to say, sometimes we operate under, I'll use this term, an elitist system, where only a select few get to have that access. But that's why we need more people who are concerned about the people, where every child is my child. Right? And every person who pays taxes, as my colleague said up here, deserves the same opportunities as everyone else. So yes, the answer is yes, most definitely.
Anybody else would like to address that?
I mean, I think one of the other aspects is to touch on what our wonderful representative said is, you know, we have to make sure that in our education system and in our schools that we have guidance counselors who are actually there to give guidance to all of our students. You know, it used to be that when you were ready to transition from high school either to a technical college or a voc rehab center or to a university, there was a guidance counselor who helped at least some of those individuals make a decision as to where they should be and to what resources are available. And that's something that we tend, I think, sometimes to overlook, and it goes back to what the representative said. We've got to make sure that our guidance counselors are communicating with our parents as well as our communities about the resources that are available.
Thank you. Let's go back to our audience. Mr. C. Wright. Yeah.
Audience, please be patient. I'm coming. I'm coming. Please be patient.
My question or comment would be for the whole panel and Mr. Smith, who's already left, but y'all can refresh him on what I'm saying. We have a system that the property that you own and the taxes goes to that school. Our system should be whatever taxes that come from the house or that house should be put in a pocket so that every student, every school get the same amount of funding.
I think if there was a question, I think the question was about equity and funding. I think that's a legislature standpoint. So, Kimber.
Oh, sorry.
You're fine. Excellent question. Education. We've got to look at how we fund our schools. I think if you look at it from a historical standpoint, some of our poor school districts in our state, if you look at Clarendon County, for example, we saw a historic case that came, Briggs versus Elliott, that came from out of Clarendon County. And so I say that to simply say, when we look at the progress that we've made in our state in education, I think that we have a lot more work to do. So in regards to the case that I just mentioned, Briggs v. Elliott, it actually led to the historic Brown case that ended school segregation and legalized segregation in our country. If Thurgood Marshall were to go back down to Clarendon County, schools would be just as segregated as they were 50 or 60 years ago today as they were then. And so that's a problem to me. I've done some research on school funding. And what South Carolina does is South Carolina funds education through a colorblind lens. And what I mean by that is South Carolina does not take race into effect in regards to the funding models here in our state. And I think historically we can't do that because we all know that the starting points aren't the same. And when the starting points aren't the same, equity looks different than equality. And so that's where I stand on that. And I think that we've got to do a better job of equitably funding our schools. I mentioned it earlier. I went down, I left college and I went down and I taught along that I-95 corridor. I went to school here in Richland School, District 1. And I'll tell you, the gaps and the disparities are there. And for us to say that they aren't there, then we're living, for anybody who says that they aren't there, those are simply alternative facts.
Thank you very much.
Somebody caught that.
I'm only going to speak to this not just as the state chair, but as the former deputy state treasurer, because I was there when the great fraud that was perpetrated upon the state of South Carolina that was created by the South Carolina Realtors Association when they convinced the General Assembly to go to Act 388. And what that did was it exchanged the way we funded schools from a stable revenue stream to a volatile revenue stream in the sales tax. So essentially and in that legislation it stated that no school year could receive less funding in the current fiscal year than they did in the prior fiscal year. Now, the reason this fraud was perpetrated was because you had individuals who owned second homes all along the coast of South Carolina, and they got tired of paying the higher tax rates because they owned a second home. And as a result of that, we lost the AAA credit rating when that bill was passed. But you also saw us hit a recession in which the tourist dollars that they said would pay and fund all of our education schools system and all of the schools and provide that equity and funding didn't happen. Because the people didn't come to Myrtle Beach, they didn't come to Georgetown, they didn't come to York, they didn't come to Charleston or Beaufort. And we haven't gotten out of that slump yet. And as a result of that, we're stuck with a system that doesn't necessarily, it creates donor counties, meaning those counties have to send their sales tax up here to pay for our school system, which is unfair if you live there. But the other problem is that it still gets us in a rut of volatility, so we don't ever really answer the question, and that's equity and funding. But I want to remind you of something, and this is why I'm here tonight. The Republicans control the state Senate. The Republicans control the state House of Representatives.
30 seconds.
They created this mess, and they simply do not believe in equality of education for everybody. And if they did, they'd fix the problem, and they would have never fought the lawsuit before the Supreme Court. They would have taken care of equity and funding.
And I'm going to jump in real fast. In education continues to be the great equalizer. It is the ladder out of poverty, and the persons on the other side of the aisle don't keep it as a priority. The truth of the matter is we continue to underfund education. We have not met our own legal status. We underfund the student-based costs. We do not pay teachers enough. We're going to have a teacher crisis as more leave, and we're not able to keep them here, but yet we'll spend $54 million or tag it for a forensic lab when nobody's complaining about having forensic issues when we know we have an education crisis.
Thank you.
You're listening to live coverage of the town hall meeting here at the Meeting Place Church of Greater Columbia on 620 AM, 96.3 FM, and streaming at WGCV.net, and on the Meeting Place social media platforms to our radio audience.
Go back to our audience.
Okay, all right. All right, I do workforce development. So my question is, I see that the unemployment rate right now in the state here is about between 3.5 and 4.5%. We have a lot of job openings that are here, but most of us in this audience know people who can't find a job. So we've got more job availability than we have people to fill them, but yet we still know people who can't find a job. All right, so my question is, how are you all going to work together to help the individuals who are coming out of prison who have these records who can't get one of these jobs that are available? See, these guys, these companies, they're checking 7 years and 10 years on your background, but if I've been out of jail 3 years and I haven't been in trouble and I still can't find a job, what do you expect me to do to survive? So I want to know, what are you all going to do to work together to help these individuals get a second chance at life if this is really a rehabilitation effort?
All right, who wants to take that? And I'm going to ask that you keep your comments down to 1 minute now because we're running out of time if possible.
And we got a lot of questions. Please.
Yes.
Sorry.
I appreciate your question. It's a difficult question, but to try to consolidate it into 1 minute, I think the key is collaborative efforts. I'm a believer in being partners with churches, community groups, the Solicitor's Office, Public Defender's Office, and also with schools as well. And what you're talking about is what I call reintegration into the population. There's certain things that can happen when it comes to expungements that we've talked about. Our Solicitor's Office has been extremely active in the expungement side, but when you're talking about multiple years in jail, those generally are not going to be expungible offenses. Those are things that we have to have the other conversation about, which is pardons. And so having business leaders who are willing to take the chance and hire people who have skills, who have had some missteps in life, that becomes important. And there are programs in different counties that I've actually been studying that are trying to work on those reintegration programs. That's going to be the key again. And when people are charged, if they're charged properly, they pay their penance, they should have an opportunity to, at some point in time, have those charges, if they do the things that are proper, possibly pardoned. So we have to have the conversation about pardons, because that gives you an opportunity to clean a record later in life and have those opportunities restored when you have your civil rights completely restored.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to address that question?
I'd like to speak to it if I may, because one of the other issues that you said has to do with education. So it goes back to us underfunding education, and not just in the K through 12, but in trade education as well. So if we could find a way to make sure that the dollars that, your tax dollars that we use, also provide programs, and there are some programs out there, as Byron has alluded to, that provide the education, because you're right, jobs in this state are available. What we don't have are people that are educated and not necessarily 4-year degrees or trained, thank you for that, who are trained to do the jobs that are available. So we have to create more opportunities and more programs that we can train those people, so as they re-enter into society, they're able to go and do the work that is available with the jobs that we have available.
Yes, how you doing? I actually had a question for the governor, and it's for your councilwoman and also the House representatives. I've been sitting here wondering, and I thought about this last week. We have a company here called Palmetto Utilities, and they just took over the sewer contract for most of Northeast Columbia. And I guess I'm having a hard time trying to figure out why they were able to double, if not triple, our sewer bill, And who's in charge of that, and how do they get that contract?
Thank you for the question. Great question. I've had 2 or 3 town halls concerning that. So it is a public utility, so it does go to the PSC, the Public Service Commission. They ultimately are the one who will review and determine whether or not a utility can raise its rates. I think one of the issues that's a huge problem with that is that it's a flat rate. So regardless of how much water you use, or even if you use no water at all, you still going to get charged based off the units, and is determined by the number of people in your house. And so particularly for persons who are on fixed incomes, and they say, well, I know it's tight this month, let me use less water, that's not going to help them out one bit. Now, the rationale that they gave, and I'm not speaking as a spokesperson for Palmetto Utilities, let me say that clearly, is that there was a lot of infrastructure and updates that they need to make the system better. But I do think that how they went about doing it was not getting, I think, the input on the front end and not phasing it in rather than just abruptly, because in many cases it doubled, if not tripled, the bill for many persons. And then once again, it's not based off your usage, but really the work that we have to do as legislators is really at the PSC level. We have to provide, because right now it's not necessarily a conflict of interest, but we need somebody who's specifically looking out for the consumer. And advocating for the consumer. And those are the things that we have to put in legislation so that it can counterbalance and really provide fairness for our ratepayers.
Before we move on to the next question, anybody else would like to address that?
I just want to take this opportunity. Dr. Thigpen already answered that question, but I wanted to thank you for having me. I'd let the organizers know that I would have to leave a little early today, so I apologize for leaving the discussion, but wanted to thank you for having me here. I'm Shakese Newton. I'm running for Richland County Council District 11, and I appreciate you and being with you tonight. Thank you so much.
How you doing? I'm actually an educator myself. And, you know, with all due respect, I moved here in 2005, and I hear the same platform, raising teacher pay, making education equitable. And we hear everybody having great speeches and everything, but when the rubber meets the road, I don't see anything done. What can be done? What would your steps be? You're in the office tomorrow. What would your specific steps be to, 1, raise teacher pay, and 2, make education equitable? And what would your steps be, specific steps?
Elect Democrats to control the House and the Senate and all the constitutional offices.
Well, what would once you're in there, what was the steps?
You'd see legislation. The last time when we passed a bond bill in the state, the last time we built new schools in this state, it was a Democrat in the South Carolina State Senate who led the fight to build new schools and passed $1 billion school bill. I think we just finished paying off that debt. It passed in 2000, and it was a Democrat, and I believe it started with a Democrat-controlled state Senate. I can't remember that, so don't hold me to it. But you elect the Democrats in the House and the state Senate, you're going to see the opportunity for bills to pass and be signed by a Democratic governor that actually will increase the per pupil funding coming out of the state of South Carolina. It's all about priorities.
And I'm going to say what Trav said a different way.
Okay, thank you.
We are such a minority in the legislature that we really can't stop. We can only slow down. We can only get a little bit of what we believe is necessary to fix the very things you said. So what we do tomorrow, tell people to vote today.
And Mr. Chairman, if I can say it a different way, losers do not legislate.
That's it.
Ms. Glenn, can you enlighten us just a little bit as to the responsibility of the Treasurer's Office and how that would really make a difference for those of us out here? Because, you know, we don't often hear from the Treasurer. We don't know exactly what you're doing up there.
Thank you for that question. And I'll just say right off the rip, the treasurer currently, in the state that it is in right now, has no responsibilities, largely due to what Trav has indicated earlier. So the legislature has taken a lot of the responsibilities from the treasurer's office. What is it supposed to do? First of all, it's supposed to manage the debt for the state. So the bonds that we're talking about in order to get education funded, we're supposed to be able to manage that. We're supposed to be able to manage, you're familiar with the 529 plan, which is an education plan. The treasurer's office manages those assets and are supposed to be investing those assets so that they can grow for your students, your children to be able to go to college. You may also be familiar with the unclaimed property. If you have monies that you've left at a bank or with anyone that belongs to you, you or a family member, you should, by the way, check out the website and make sure your name is not on there, because you can get some money, because the banks are required to escheat that money to the state, and the treasurer's office manages that money. There also has been, in past, the treasurer has been responsible for managing or working with the team to manage the state pension and making those investment decisions, which we are going to have to make some hard decisions about the pension, because if any of you are state workers right now, you should have some concerns about that pension, because it is really unstable as it is. And that's really what got me into this race, is because I am a financial advisor by profession, and I work with clients who I can't really help them be assured as state employees that they're going to have longevity in their retirement, because I'm not sure about the sustainability of the retirement plan. And so the treasurer, as the chief, I like to say, financial officer of the state, should have some input in working with the legislature. While we have no responsibility of making decisions, I think one of the positions that, and one of the things that I will do as treasurer, is work with the legislatures, because they don't know everything, right? And so they have to use resources that are available to them to make the best decisions for you, the citizens of the state. And so providing that level of education and working in partnership with the governor and the legislature to make the best decisions around investing and managing the tax dollars is what the treasurer's office is supposed to do.
Thank you. Let's go back out to the floor, take 5 more minutes of questions. Go ahead.
Okay, I have 2 questions. And my first question will be to Ms. Holmes. Let me ask both of them first, and I'm going to sit down. Mine will be to you. How do you feel about zero tolerance? I want your opinion on zero tolerance. And then for the solicitors, I want to ask, the 85% law was passed in, I think, 1996. And with this being done, it put an increase in the, I guess, the offenders. It's an increase. How do you see in keeping the 85% law intact and not having to the numbers rise in the correctional facility or the prisons?
Okay.
All right, you have 1 minute each to address that. Go ahead.
Addressing your concern about zero tolerance, that's a difficult question to answer, but I'm a very straight up person, so I'm just going to say what I really think about that. I think zero tolerance has its place, but I also think it has to be managed with common sense. For example, I'll give you an example. A small 4-year-old child who, for example, let's say 6-year-old takes a knife to school, like a Swiss knife to school in their book bag that they may have had on a camping trip with their family, and they have left it, per se, in their book bag. But the child brings it to school, and according to zero tolerance, you have to expel or suspend them. To me, that's where the common sense aspect of it. But it's twofold, because unfortunately, we're living in a time where school safety is a key issue. And so I'm a little torn on both of that, because if you look on the news, the students that went to school and did the crimes of shooting other students and doing other students, they did not look like they would hurt a fly. So you have to kind of balance that situation with common sense, and then also look at the age of the students and the overall intent, if you can try to ascertain what that intent was. I hope that answers your question.
Go ahead.
Again, the 65, 85, and you're right on the year when that was changed. That's a legislature decision. We really don't have control over that. What we do have control over, and I think we both said it, if the facts warrant it, we do have the discretion to take something from a violent to a nonviolent, which it would be less than 85%. And that's got to be done on a case-by-case basis, considering the gravity of the crime. Was it a murder? Was it a rape? And looking at someone's prior record. And I've been doing that for 30 years. We don't have anything to do with the 85% and 65%. And there's certain crimes, murders. I've handled over 100 murders in my career. I've been with families from the outset where their families have been murdered, their young ones, primarily young African Americans, that I've been dealing with their mothers, their fathers, their sisters, their brothers for 30 years, helping through the criminal justice process, helping them understand it. And a lot of those individuals, they want these folks to serve 85% or more. They've lost somebody.
30 seconds.
They've died. They've been raped. So if there's a case that doesn't call for that, that's where the discretion and experience comes in. And you talk with the victims, you talk to law enforcement, you don't let them tell you what to do. It's your decision, and you decide, and you've got to have courage. And if it's not the right thing to do, you take it out of an 85%.
Thank you.
That's all we can do.
Mr. Gibson.
I think the key here is the discretion piece of this. And when I say discretion, for instance, burglary first is something you hear about. I'll just give you a quick example. Oftentimes burglary first is a very simple thing to define. Essentially, if a person goes into another's dwelling without permission at night, that can qualify as burglary first. Or it can be entering into a person's dwelling with a weapon. Sometimes you see people charged with burglary first in a domestic situation. That may be a situation, two people have a disagreement, the door is closed on them, they're told to leave, maybe it's a boyfriend, girlfriend, maybe it's, and the person pushes that door back open, it's nighttime, they didn't have permission to come in, now they're charged with burglary first, which is an 85%er. There's a discretionary piece there because a solicitor, I'm a person who uses analogies a lot. I'm a believer the dog should wag the tail shouldn't wag the dog. If you're the dog, you need to be controlling how things happen. If you see that, you need to be able to have the courage. Again, it's courage when it counts. And you have to have the courage to look at a case and tell whomever the charge was made. And sometimes it means not making people happy, whether it may be victims, sometimes not making them happy and giving them what they want, but what the law says should be there. It should be a burglary second, maybe. Or maybe it should be a nonviolent offense. But you have that discretion, and you got to use that discretion as a solicitor. You've got to have the courage to do those things. So I'm a believer in using that. Again, in 21 years, I've sat in living rooms of people who've been charged with crimes who truly didn't do it. I've had people who've been charged with murder in true self-defense situations. And gone before juries, and juries come back and tell you, hey, they're not guilty because they didn't do those things. They had to protect themselves. They had to do those things. And had a solicitor had the courage to sit down and explain what self-defense truly is, and the fact that a person who is at work and being attacked, who's been attacked year after year after year by a group of people, who was attacked at work with somebody with a gun and protected himself because that's all he could do.
Thank you, Mr.
It's not murder. So it's the courage to do the right thing, and sometimes that can help you in that 85%.
We have time for one more question from our audience. Mr. Seawright.
Dr. Holmes, many people routinely say that no one becomes an educator for the money, yet great educators provide the foundations for all professions. If elected, how would you help raise the perception and the importance of the teaching profession?
I I think that, first of all, by serving on this board, if elected, that's raising the aspect of it right there itself. If you've noticed tonight, I'm not very shy. And I'm very vocal. I am an advocate for my profession because I've done it for 32 years. I know that you have to do things like get our teachers to get on board with voting. One thing that I hear constantly is some of my friends are legislators, and one thing that I've heard constantly from them, they always say, your teachers want this, but they don't vote. And I'm like, well, I know all the teachers that I know, everybody votes. So I don't know who they're polling because I know every time a vote comes up, I'm at the poll. So what I'm saying to you, the first thing that we need to do to raise that is we have to get behind the legislative aspect of getting the teacher salaries raised. It was said earlier, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. Not saying that that is fair, but you know how God said favor ain't fair, and the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So as a collective body, we as teachers, we as educators, if we want our system to be different, we have to absolutely vote. So what I would do is, if by serving on this board, I would be a visible presence. I'm not shy. I don't bite my tongue. I'm straightforward. And I will say that, and I will continue to say that. And I will also say to the teachers that are on the ground, get up and go vote. Because they're saying that we're not doing that. And we need to show them that if we want these changes for our children and for ourselves in the practice, that we need to get up there and vote and become active.
Thank you.
Again, I'm not a politician, but I'm here as an educator. Thank you.
Our final question from the bishop. You have a...
I do have a final question, and I want to thank all of you and Don and PA for your tremendous leadership and stamina in this entire dialogue. Let's just celebrate. We wanted to hear from you, and we've heard from you. We reached out to both sides of the aisle in those instances where that makes sense, but we wanted to hear everyone's voice. We thank you for not approaching this meeting from the perspective of us being monolithic, because our parishioners and those that are of this community are not monolithic, even if we may look the same in many instances. And so that is a notable thing. And those that we reached out to that didn't respond, we are hopeful that this is an encouragement. We had several people that have called over the last couple hours wanting to speak, and we'll do something hopefully where all voices can be heard. But I want to say this. It's said that all politics is local. However, it's hard for me to believe that our national climate doesn't impact local politics. I'm just curious, and the table is open for anyone to respond. How do you believe your responsibilities, for those that are incumbents, or for those that are aspirants, how do you believe your responsibilities can either enhance or improve the climate of our nation through your local service here in our community, our region, and our state?
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Gibson, and we'll go down the line, and you have 1 minute. Go ahead. I'm sorry, but we're running out of time.
No, I understand. My candidacy, there are a couple things I'll say, and to try to make it concise. My children are 13 and 11, and what I do matters. I'm a reflection of them. I'm a reflection of my wife, who's in the audience, and I serve on the school improvement council. I've served on that a couple years at A.C. Moore Elementary School. I've been involved in our communities. I say that to say what's important is being involved in our communities, because that's where it starts. I'm running for this office because I love my community. It's not the job, it's the community. And I believe that with the gifts that the Lord has blessed me with, and the intellect that He's blessed me with, and some of the abilities and some of the contacts that I've been able to make over my years, and some of the good fortune I've had practicing law for years, there are things that I can teach So I'm a believer if I can teach the things that I know and educate others, number one, about the criminal justice system and how it works, two, in letting them see a black man doing some positive things in this community and willing to give back and work hard to raise others, no matter who you are or what your race may be, what your zip code may be, just to work and show that if we work hard, if we pray hard, if we care about our communities, our collective efforts can raise our community.
Thank you.
That's what I believe in, and those are the values that I begin to bring to this office.
Bishop, thank you for having us tonight. My job is somewhat different than these individuals as they are elected to carry out specific duties. My job is to be the torchbearer for a party, and I've taken that responsibility somewhat, as you may have read in the paper recently, when I decided that I'd had enough of people calling themselves Christians, but they stood silently by while they tore babies away from their mamas and daddies and threw them in cages. My dad graduated from the seminary, and he never taught me about any point of Scripture that allowed us. So I think that I have decided to no longer remain silent. I'm going to call out the hypocrisy of the Republicans who stand up and say they're good Christians, but they're silent when they take babies away from mamas and daddies. Or those Republicans who claim to be patriotic and love America, but they stand silent when a president refuses to honor a man who couldn't even raise his arms because he was tortured in a prisoner of war camp defending the United States of America. And I will make sure that I call out a president who comes to South Carolina during a point of crisis, who has no empathy and can't display that empathy to people in pain, but goes back to Washington and 3 hours after he lands has a video of his trip to South Carolina that has a Republican governor. But they say nothing when 2 mentally ill patients under the governor's charge in the Department of Mental Health die, and they stand silent. That's my charge.
Again, thank you all for hosting this forum tonight. And to the question, Bishop, I think there's no question about it. We're living in challenging times. We're divided every day along racial lines, black versus white versus brown. We hear debates such as blue lives matter, black lives matter, all lives matter. And and I think leadership starts at the top. And so when we hear these sorts of things from Washington, and then we see some of these sorts of things at our Capitol here in Columbia, I think it makes us question, are we really making progress as a country and as a society? But I'm optimistic tonight. I'm optimistic because even during our darkest days, we always are resilient. We always find a way to find the light at the end of the tunnel. And I say to all the young folks that are listening tonight, and to really anybody, if you aren't happy with what you see happening in your community, if you aren't happy with what you see happening on your college campuses, if you aren't happy with what you see happening in your state, just don't stay on the sidelines and wait for somebody to tell you to wait your turn.
30 seconds.
Stand up, stand out, and be heard and make a difference, because we are the change that we've been waiting for. And I'm inspired because we have a generation that's coming and that's ready to make things happen. And again, thank you all for the opportunity to be here tonight. Remember to get out and vote, not November, October 8th, and again November 6th. Thank you.
Mr. Meadows.
Bishop, all the members, thank you for letting me be here and all of us be here. I've really enjoyed it. How can my actions perhaps affect nationally? I don't know. But I think the way I treat each case and the way I treat each person, be tough when you have to be or need to be, but be fair and be consistent. One person at a time. I think that's how we can change things. I'm lucky. I didn't deserve it. But I had a mom and dad who cared about me more than I deserved. My dad's a retired United Methodist bishop. My mother was a founding member of Ida Quincy Newman United Methodist Church. It was the first church. The attempt was to have a true integrated church. She's in heaven now. But we went back a few years ago for anniversary of the founding of that church. Did they have an effect on me and how I treated and looked at people? You daggone right they did. I've raised my children that way, and I think my children are going to do that. And I've been doing that as a prosecutor. I love this job. I got committed to it the day I did it. You go ask every family I've dealt with, any one of them over 30 years that I've dealt with at a homicide, you ask them if I cared. Ask them if I was fair and if I treated them with respect. Ask any one of them. I love this job. My number is 351-1732.
Thank you, Mr.
I want
Meadows.
every one of you to call me. I'd love to talk to you. And we're not monolithic. We're not. And it offends me when people say we are.
Thank you.
This isn't about Democrat or Republican. This is about doing justice is blind. And I'm ready to be your solicitor. Thank you. 351-1732, 803 area code.
Bishop, thank you again for having this, and I apologize for being late. I had an event in Aiken earlier, and we speeded to get back here. So thank you again for having me. Two things about the influence of the national office. What I believe is leadership is not about position. Leadership is about influence. As leaders, we are supposed to influence others to act or react in a manner that is for the greater good of all of us. And so, as in that vein, I bring with me my integrity and my character. It is all I have. My daddy and my mother instilled that in me, and I bring that with me as I come into this position. And however I leave the position, I will still have my character and my integrity. And I believe having that means that I will have to stand up and speak when things come down from the national level to the state level.
30 seconds.
If it's not in the best interest of all of us, then I have to have the courage to say, no, that is not right. I have to be able to provide a solution, because I just cannot complain without having a solution. So I have to be resourceful and provide a solution to whatever I think the problem is. And I have to be a team builder and a collaborator and make sure that we're all working together from the gubernatorial level all the way down to the State Department level.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be and an honor to be up here with all of these persons. Thank you, Bishop, for your question. It was profound, and I think one that all should answer, not just elected officials. The time has come, and now is. I often say it this way, the water is receding. There's a phenomenon with a tidal wave that before the crashing wall of destruction comes, it builds momentum. But that momentum comes from a draw from the inland. And when the water recedes back, it reveals stuff that's been there all along, but you just couldn't see it because it was under the water. Those who survive this are those who are not paralyzed, those who are not apathetic, those who not just sit back and watch silently. But when the water recedes, it is the time to act. The water is receding. And we as a people
30 seconds.
must come together. We must act. I am in District 79. For many months, we did voter registration drives. Come to find out, our voter registration percentage of unregistered voters able to vote is 0. 0 point something 016. It's the turnout rate.
That's right.
The water is receding.
Thank you.
Bishop, I'd like to say thank you for having the newcomer come out tonight. I really appreciate it. I'm going to answer your question this way. Being a current educator, and that's what I do every day, I think it's vastly important that I serve as a role model for our students. I also think that the platform would allow me to, because I've done voter registrations with our students before this even came up, because I know the importance of voting, and our students have to understand that. But I think being on this platform, I would bring to this something that was a little different. It's okay to be different. It's okay to be bold. It's okay to be a woman with an opinion. It's okay to be a woman that understands that you have to do things that make, not just for yourself, but for your community. And the last thing, because we do so much for the males in our community, the last thing I really wanted to say is, on TV, they show our females as the love and hip hop generation. And I wanted to serve on this board and be a part of moving forward, because I think our girls deserve to see women in a different light, who are smart, who are educated, who are well kept, and who serve the community.
Thank you.
And for our boy, since I have a son also, I wanted to show him that this is the kind of woman that you should seek to try to have. Again, I'm new to politics. I'm not new to this. I'm true to this. I'm an educator.
Thank you very much. We would like to thank the candidates, Shakise Newman from candidate for Richland County Council, District 2, Mr. Byron Gibson, Fifth Circuit Solicitor, Democratic candidate, Mr. Cambrell Garvin, House District 77, Mr. John Meadows, Fifth Circuit Solicitor, petition candidate, Mr. Ivory Thigpen, House District 79, Mr. Trav Robertson, who is with the chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party, Dr. Teresa Jones Holmes, Richland County Council School District 2 candidate, and Dr. Rosalind Glenn for candidate for state treasurer. Let's give them a big hand. Also want to thank Antoine Seawright for handling the mics on the floor. Thank you, Antoine.
Again, we appreciate all of the candidates being with us tonight, and now we'll ask Bishop Freeman to give closing remarks.
I said everything that I wanted to say earlier, and I want to thank, again, all of the candidates, and I want to thank Donald Frierson and Don Frierson, and P.A. Bennett, amen, and Antoine Seawright. He did a wonderful job, amen. I'm going to dismiss you, and after I dismiss them, I'll just turn it right back over to you, but the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Lord, turn his countenance towards you and give you peace. Amen.
Amen. Good night, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Good night.
It's hard to make these things exciting, you know? Thank you.